Unlike its predecessor, the Fall of Cybertron game got its own subline in Generations. I guess the 5 War for Cybertron toys were a test run. We got a brand new deluxe Optimus Prime, which was eventually recolored and retooled into Ultra Magnus. With a twist. An Optimus mold redone as Ultra Magnus was hardly new at the time, but whereas prior repaints homaged the cab portion of the G1 Ultra Magnus toy, here the deco is based on the trailer that converts into the battle armor G1 Magnus is known for. And man does he look sweet. The dark blue, dark grey, white, red, and silver go together wonderfully. It's done to emulate the armor's appearance in the G1 cartoon. Blue is the most predominant colour. The white smokestacks evoke the tall shoulder stacks. The chest is partially painted red. The fists, upper arms, and thighs are cast in white. It's not a perfect match. There's less white on the shins, for instance, but I don't think it's trying to be. Though the Takara version, amongst other changes, is done in a brighter blue to better match the game design. Also, FOC Magnus has a different head from Prime that's based on the G1 battle helmet. As for the rest of the mold, there are at least 2 ways to look at it when it comes to Magnus. In terms of game accuracy, you'll be disappointed, as FOC Magnus has his own model based on, again, the G1 armor. In fact, it looks to be a battlesuit in the game too, as the alt mode resembles an armored version of FOC Prime's, with the actual truck inside being white, again, like the cab of the G1 figure. Meanwhile, this toy is simply Prime in Magnus's battlesuit colors, though the mold as Prime is indeed game accurate, from the angular upper body to the exhaust pipes on his shoulders to the faux wheels sculpted on the back. However, as a figure in and of itself, I'd say Magnus works fine. While the shoulders feel like they should extend just a tad, the core bot design has an all-around powerful build, and aside from the truck bumper halves on his arms, is much cleaner compared to the last mold used for Optimus Prime from the games. FOC Magnus has 18 points of articulation, most of them being ball joints, though you also have swivels below the shoulders and hips, and like WFC Megatron, an over 90-degree bend in the elbows and knees. Then again, given his armament, he looks pretty badass even in a more neutral stance. Speaking of, in addition to a recolor of Prime's blaster, Magnus also comes with a sword that splits into 3 parts and combines with said blaster to form a weapon as tall as the figure itself. The ports on his forearms, shins, and back enable you to store any of his arsenal. With the one on his back, his arms are properly jointed and long enough to reach behind for the sword in both its configurations. The transformation's much simpler than WFC Prime, and frankly, that's all I'm in the mood for at times. Though a word of caution, the bumper halves can pop off the ball joints depending on how you handle the toy, so watch out for that one. The Cybertronian truck mode is smaller compared to the War for Cybertron design, and sure, it also lacks the heft of that previous deluxe, yet it still looks pretty robust in its own right. Maybe it's the sharper dynamic angles and edges in the front half that create that effect. This truck was apparently dubbed a rolling fist by one of the designers. I can kinda see the resemblance, but I think it looks good regardless, and as Prime, very faithful to the game model. There aren't a lot of new details revealed here, since it's essentially just the robot folded up, but most of the sculpting and paintwork carries over from the previous mode, and it looks pretty neat. I never thought I'd compliment a Transformers toy for things like painted wheels, but thanks to inflation and cost-cutting measures taken with the more recent figures, it doesn't seem out of place to do so now, does it? For weapon storage, in addition to the shin ports now on the sides of the truck, there are extra peg holes in the rear as well as within the highest smokestacks. Of the 3 video game figures I reviewed back to back, Fall of Cybertron Magnus might actually be my favourite. If you're buying the base mold as Prime, it is simpler than the WFC design, but with that comes a pretty cool looking imposable figure that's smoother to transform. Of course, the Ultra Magnus retool provides the option of owning both molds, without having to buy the same character again, plus you get a bonus weapon. For a more accurate representation of Magnus from the games, you'll need to go third party with Planet X's Apollo. Otherwise, this is a welcome addition to your War 4/Fall of Cybertron roster.